Sharing stories is one of the best ways to motivate, inspire, and compel change. And one of the best ways to share these stories is through film. No other medium can provide a more complete experience, at least so far. In part 2 of my interview, Bert Hesse shares not only the compelling stories that they are currently producing, but how all these stories will be shared and experienced in the future. From short-form, episodic content specifically designed for our phones, to the immersive experience that is the future of virtual reality. Part 2 of our conversation discusses what all of this will look like in the future, and how entrepreneurs who are paying attention can take advantage. Learn how to manage high-level negotiations and hanging with an American Idol, and the rest of my conversation with Bert Hesse. How do you enjoy spending your time? What do you do when you have some free time?
That's a good question. I mean, I just enjoy what I do, which is really good. You know, for someone who I would say I was almost
dyslexic.
See, and I have a speech impediment too. No, but I almost, when I was younger, I had problems reading and really didn't like reading at all, and was embarrassed if I ever had to read out loud in a class like in elementary school or something like that. But as I got older, I sort of trained my mind a little to be able to read. I still have, as my wife will say, I still mispronounce words when I read them. But
switching up the letters.
Yeah.
I do that too sometimes.
We get probably during a month 5-6 scripts, concepts. We have 2 projects in development that are based on novels that I had to read to make sure this is something we want to get involved with. I read a lot. I know that reading is not sort of considered what you do in your leisure time necessarily exciting, but
I think that's absolutely a huge part of what I try to do with my spare time.
And I think that's helped me, as I said, getting all these other businesses. I read a lot. The greatest comment is when someone asked Elon Musk when he started the SpaceX, he was going to put a man to Mars, something like that, and they said, "What do you know about rocketry and space?" He says, "Well, I read a lot." It's like, okay, you read a lot, and so now you're a rocket scientist. And
which in
yes,
his case,
I
that's
am.
Probably about true, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So, because I remember when I was in technology, which I knew nothing about, I can't remember the name of the magazine. It came out once a week, I think. It was called Computer World or something like that. And I would just read it and devour it. And 60% of the stuff I was reading, I had no idea what I was reading. But a while...
But you knew it was important, though.
Yeah,
you knew it was relevant to what you were doing.
And it's like anything. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You have to, I feel, you have to come across as at least you sound competent, because, people make that impression. How do you come across? And I've always sort of been able to come across as somewhat competent or faking my way through it, so that people would at least entrust me to bring in computer people or healthcare people or movie people, that type of thing.
It helps you know the nomenclature, right? Like when you can speak when you know the terms, when you know the acronyms, when you know a lot of those things, that at least it helps you to understand and keep up with what.
But the key thing that I think is the most important is that human connection. Because as I deal with people, we get our movies funded through extremely high net worth people and some other entities. And these people are very smart, and they look at performance statements and financial statements. But I tell them, I heard a great saying the other day, because, they're all saying numbers don't lie, right? And I say, yes, numbers don't lie, but sometimes the people who create those numbers do. So, you might think you're looking at something really good. Tell all the people who had Enron stock that were looking at their financial statements. So this place is going gangbusters. Mm-hmm. It was all lies. And so, yes, you have to be competent in what you're talking about, but most of the time it comes down to that gut feeling. Yeah. Do they like you? Do they trust you? If they don't like you or trust you, you can show them 1,000% return on their money. And the people we deal with, they're not necessarily looking for a big return on their money. They've already got more money than they, I don't want to say know what to do with, but money is not an issue for them. Right? They don't want to lose
their
money.
Primary focus.
Right. They don't want to lose money, and they don't want to be scammed out of anything.
No, but it's more like they want to be passionate about something.
They want to be passionate about and being part of something that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for them.
For sure. How do you go about getting into those types of relationships with those types of people?
You got to be where they're at, and you've got to, you almost have to come across like, and again, this is my sales pitch or sales theory. You almost have to come across like you don't need their money. You're giving them, I'm giving you the opportunity. So if you want to talk about it, yeah, we can talk about it, but I'm not going to push you. Because when I start coming across like I really need you for something, then that's when the red flag starts going up. If these guys are so successful, why is it such a high pressure thing? So I'm dealing with a group in an industry right now that extremely high net worth people, and you almost have to come across, which I do, is like, this is what I do. This is a project that I'm involved with. You might be interested in it, and if you are, let me know. But I'm not.
It's a soft sale.
Yeah. I mean, if you get involved with me one way or the other, it's not going to determine the life or death of this project.
Right.
It's going to be something you're going to enjoy, and you have a chance of making some money and being involved. Okay, you've got some yachts, you've got your own horses, you have a NASCAR team or whatever. I mean, these people, they sit around the country club. They don't talk about their mutual funds.
Yeah, because those are boring.
Yeah, no one. They talk about their sports teams they own and the yachts they own, or the movies they're involved with, or that type of thing. So
that's pretty cool. So we talked about reading. So you've become a pretty voracious reader, and that certainly helped you along the way. Mm-hmm. Were there any books that had a deep and meaningful impact with you, and any ones that are kind of go-tos for you?
Well, and I think most people that listen to this podcast won't even know who I'm talking about, but there's a guy called Zig Ziglar.
Oh yeah. I love that guy.
I got involved with some of his tapes and some of his books.
What appealed to me so much about him in particular was, as opposed to like a Tony Robbins or some of these other guys that are in that same vein, is the accent, the Southern colloquialisms.
Yeah.
So like for me, he was so appealing because he sounds like me. Well, if he can be a Southern redneck out here slinging this stuff, then so can I. And so that was a big inspiration.
And what was his, I think one of his best lines was, you can get what you want in this life if you help enough people get what they want.
That's exactly right.
And that is so true.
Well, that's a great point to lead into another question that I had for you was, I try to take that to everyone, especially with doing this podcast. You guys are doing me a favor by coming on and talking to me. So one of the things I'm always trying to do is, what can I do for you? Did you ever take that approach with some of these more influential people, some of these guys that have a higher net worth?
These people that we deal with, they're just, they're extremely wealthy, but again, they're just like everyone else. They have hopes, they have dreams, they have problems, they have health issues. They, just for whatever reason, they have, on the financial side, they don't have to worry about it. But just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that everything's going good. Or
quite frankly, a lot of times it's not, right?
Right.
I mean,
or they feel that at this stage in their life, they really want to have an impact on something. And even though they have all this money, yes, they can give some of it away to charities, which is always nice, and to children's hospitals, which are always great. But
you don't feel the impact.
Right. And what is the number one medium in the world to educate, change the minds, or inspire people? Movies. Yeah, for sure. So if you want to do that,
for now anyway.
Yeah, I know.
That might be changing.
But when you look at our slate of films, and again, going back to Tony, I love you, Tony, but there's no horror movies in our films. I went through that genre. It was fun. And the one thing I did promise my wife when I said, listen, I'm going to get in the film industry, she goes, okay, the one thing you promised me, that you'll never do anything that embarrasses our family or our name. because
the no porn was already
yeah, I know.
given.
I said, well, shoot, that cuts out 90% of the content. So now what am I going to do? So I said, yes, dear, because fortunately and unfortunately, my name pops up usually first as an executive producer.
Right.
So when you look at our slate of films that we have right now, and that's not to say I won't get back in any horror content, because of the kinds of horror movies that Tony and I did, Night in Feeders and Cold Storage and things like that, he was really good at developing the characters. There was a story. It just wasn't a slasher film, as we called gore porn, which is, let's show some nudity.
How much blood can we throw out there?
And, and that type of thing. But in our slate right now, we don't have any horror movies, but I would love to get back with Tony and work on some things. We really have stories that a lot of them are based on true facts and based on true stories. My theory is, and while I'm not a big Marvel fan, I mean, I think they have a great business model and they are doing great, but they're just, I don't need superheroes, people flying around and all this other stuff to be entertained. There are so many great human stories out there. And why not take these and really develop them into something that's interesting, like this Child of the Forest?
Yeah, would you tell us a little bit about that story?
This came about. I was involved with on a documentary called "In the Footsteps of Elie Wiesel." I don't know if you know who Elie is.
I don't. I mean, obviously, I saw it when I was doing my research, but I'm not familiar.
He passed away a couple years ago. And I think there still might be some Auschwitz concentration camp survivors left, but he was one of them. He was in Auschwitz, I think, from when he was 12 to 15, so in very informative years. And so when it got liberated, here's a person who could be very negative on the human race.
Certainly.
I mean, he saw the worst of the worst in there. And so, this person could have come out and just been, negative. And yet he was so positive about humanity. It was like, how do you do this? So he went on to become a lecturer, a professor. He wrote numerous books, but I think one of his most successful books was a book called Night that a lot of high school kids still read. And he wound up winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And what happened was he had this very successful foundation and was going through life very well. And one day his business manager shows up in his office and says, Elie, we have a problem. He says, well, what's the problem? He says, Bernie Madoff. And he goes,
oh, no.
Who's Bernie Madoff?
God,
he said, well, let me tell you what's been going on with your money. And he lost
man.
a substantial part of his personal net worth and the majority of his foundation.
Oh, man, that's tough.
And so we got involved with a documentary with the actor Richard Gere, who did the voiceover for us in this, who is very close friends with Elie, to do this documentary In the Footsteps of Elie Wiesel. And so we did this, and we used it as a fundraiser to replenish some of the funds to his foundation.
Awesome.
So he was in Charlotte for the premiere. He was one of those people, there are few people in life that they just have this energy around them. And a lot of people think you're, smoking something when you talk about energy and people and positive people who have positive energy and negative people have negative energy. But I've met a few people like that have that very positive energy. And I've met a few people that have that very negative energy, but he had this positive energy that just like lit up a room, and you shook his hand and it was like, you're touching something special.
Yeah. It's like tangible.
Yeah. And so we were talking before the premiere or something, and he said, Bert, he said, I survived Auschwitz. I survived the Nazis, but I didn't survive Bernie Madoff. And I said, well, now what are you going to do? He goes, I'm just going to replenish the funds. I mean, to him, money was.
Well, having gone through
that, I mean,
yeah.
he could have been sitting there just eating himself alive. I've worked all my life for all this money now, and a brother has screwed me out of it.
Yeah.
How can that happen?
Yeah.
You can start questioning your faith.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because that's what Madoff did. He went heavily into the Jewish community.
Yeah, sure.
And so you can start questioning your faith. You can start questioning a lot of things. Why would God do this to me? But he was like, money comes, money goes. I'll replenish it. Hey, thanks for doing this premiere for me. It's like,
Well, it's
okay.
funny that you bring him up because one of my all-time favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and it's the same thing. I mean, he walked in Auschwitz with a finished book. Finished book that he lost, and the only reason why he went there was because he was looking out for his parents, and to lose everything, including his pregnant wife and their child, and then to come out of that not jaded, to come out of that experience still with such a positive outlook on humanity.
I think
amazing.
Ellie actually saw his parents either die in Auschwitz or they got separated and never saw him again, or something like that.
The tragedies that occurred over there are just they're hard to comprehend. You know,
so. In the Footsteps of Elie Wiesel goes out, and it was very successful, and actually played in the.
I was gonna say it won some awards, didn't it? Played in some of the film festival awards.
But what I was most proud of is actually played in the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C.
Oh, no kidding! Wow.
And
what a tribute!
Yeah, that was really, really good. And so I really liked that. And then I met this guy named Jack Grossman, who was in Charlotte also, who had heard about the film and contacted me and said, I really enjoyed Footsteps. I've got a story about something that happened during the Holocaust that I think is really important to tell. And of course, I'm like, oh yeah, we get a lot of people all the time. I've got a great story that's going to make a great movie. And then you hear their story and you go, that's not a,
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Next.
Appreciate that.
Everybody thinks that they have this great, the Gone with the Wind. This is going to be the next Citizen Kane.
Right.
And then you hear it and, I said, well, I'm sorry, I just don't get it. So Jack Grossman, I can't remember if he told me the story on the phone or he met at my office. And he tells me the story. And I'm like, yeah, dude, right. That really happened. Come on. Because unfortunately, like any type of story, but in Nazi Holocaust stories, over the years they get embellished.
Sure, of course.
Or they're really not true. They're just folklore,
morph,
that type of thing. And the story Jack told me, to my first opinion, was, this never happened. Yeah. This didn't happen.
We're going way out of left field here now.
Thanks, Jack. But then we did the research on it, and we had it verified that this literally happened. And he told me the story about this little girl in Poland, basically survived for 3 years in the woods alone, getting away from captives.
Wow.
And, we're in North Carolina and South Carolina, and you know how harsh the winters can be.
Sure.
Poland.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
In the woods.
I think she was from 12, 13, and 14, and she survived on her own for 3 years. And everything from eating roadkill to bugs to every now and then she would get in a house that might take her in for a night, but they knew that she was Jewish and she was running. And so they would make sure that, hey, you're out of here in the morning.
We're going to get taken out.
So, I mean, every now and then. So at no one time would she spend weeks or months with a family.
Right.
And she was just gone.
A day here, a day there.
And for a girl that age to survive that, her name is Charlene Schiff. She passed away a couple years ago, but survived all that, came to America, was married for a lot of years, was never able to have children. And I'm sure a lot of it had to do with during those years, her body was tormented with what's going on.
No, imagine.
And so it's called Child of the Forest. It's just a great, great inspirational story. So that's one of our stories that are in development.
That's really cool.
And then we have a story called Invisible in development, which we're really excited about. That's actually a story, an internal story that was developed internally. I was in Charlotte, and I was reading, and I can't remember if it was a sports page or the city page or whatever it was, but I just remember the headlines. It said, homeless soccer team wins championship game. I'm like, wow, that's, homeless. What's a homeless soccer team? I guess that's a soccer team make out of homeless people, and well, what are they playing in and that type of thing. And so, didn't think too much about it. Then over the years, it kept coming back and coming back. Just the tagline, homeless soccer team wins championship game. and found out that there was a facility in Charlotte, it's still there. It's called the Urban Ministry Center, and it deals with homelessness and things like that. And they put together a homeless soccer team that goes on and does these great things. Now, we've embellished the story a little and added characters, but the essence of the story is about, and we did a lot of research on homelessness. And that's one of the things that I would ask writers to do. One of the things that seems that when we get a story, a script, a synopsis, they have not taken the time to do the research on that subject. They just write this nice little story. And to make things believable, you've got to do the research. You've got to know. So we've spent
what works. And
we spent a lot of time with homeless people. We spent a lot of time at Urban Ministry Center. Why are people homeless? And how does a homeless soccer team go out and win a city league playing against Bank of America, Duke Power? These guys are showing up with $200 cleats,
right,
with the
all the
beautiful
gear,
all the latest thing,
right.
And these guys
Trainers.
are homeless. Yeah, I don't want to give the story away, but it's just a great story. Now we added one character, a friend of mine, who I really think is going to be a great actor. His name is Bo Bice. I don't even know who Bo.
I know Bo Bice. That from you talking about from
American Idol. Yeah. Right. Okay.
I was gonna say I know that name.
Yeah. So Bo, I've got to know Bo over the years, and
No
he is just a
kidding.
great guy. And I said, Bo, I'm going to make you a star. That type of, I mean, he doesn't need my help, but
Right, I was
I
gonna
mean,
say,
he's
well on
very,
his way,
he's
yeah.
very accomplished, in the music
Musically,
field.
sure.
Obviously his competition with Carrie Underwood I think it was the 4th season, but he went on to just do unbelievable things in music, and
Sure.
he actually lives in Florida. And I've got to know Bo and love him. He's just a great guy. But, when we were doing this Invisible, I said, there's got to be a part I'm going to write in for Bo Bice,
Cool.
And I called him. I said, Bo, I told him about the story. He loved the story. And I said, I want to write in a character for you only. I'm writing this character. We are writing this character for you and you alone. You don't have to audition. It's yours to do with what you want. And he said, oh, that's great.
Yeah, awesome.
And his character is called Orlando.
Nice.
What we found out doing our research in homelessness is that a lot of homeless people, one, they have no idea where they were born. They don't know how old they are. Some of them have never met their parents or anything like that. And some of them have names after where they were actually born, like Orlando or a Dallas or that type of thing.
Yeah.
So the concept is Orlando. He works for the city's maintenance department, and which a lot of people don't realize that a lot of homeless people have full-time jobs,
Right.
And now this took place in 2009.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Orlando works for the city's maintenance department, and he has the leaf blower on his back all day. So he's blowing leaves. So people see him. They think that he's singing, but they can't hear him because the leaf blower is going loud. And so when he turns off the leaf blower, he stops singing because he's not sure he can even sing, right? So the
And
concept,
of course, it's Bo. So
it's
an
Bo
incredible
Bice. I mean,
incredible
he
singer.
can't sing. Come on, man. So he's blowing leaves, and then he gets involved with the soccer team. Now, he's not one of the soccer players. He sort of becomes their manager and brings water on the bench and cheers them up. I mean, the character is just so lovable. He's just, and Bo is like that. I mean, you meet Bo, you love Bo.
Right.
So he gets conned into entering this open mic contest at a bar one night, right? And he gets up there, and everybody sees that he's the leaf blower guy because he's just got Orlando, and they start making fun. Hey, leaf blower, can you sing? And so he gets up there, and he belts out
Kills
this
it.
song,
Yeah.
and there's dead silence, everything like that, and he wins the $200, right?
Awesome.
Now, this is during the season when the team is playing, and they now are on the upswing, and it's almost before the championship game. And he's been a huge part of this team, motivating them, and on the bench at all the
Pushing
games and
them
everything,
along,
right?
Yeah.
And so it's a couple weeks before the championship game. He wins this contest. He's walking home because he's living at like the Y. So he's not living on the streets, you know.
Right.
Homeless does not mean living on the streets necessarily. There's sheltered homelessness and there's unsheltered homelessness. Unsheltered homelessness is you're on the street.
Right.
Sheltered homeless is you don't have a permanent address somewhere.
Right.
So he's sheltered, but he's living in the Y. Wins $200. He's walking back to the Y. Two guys follow him from the bar, and the last thing you see him, boom, he gets stabbed. And like he's on the floor, bleeding out. I can tell you there will not be a dry eye when that scene happens.
Right.
Okay? But prior to that, he gets conned into singing the national anthem at the opening of the soccer season. And so he's standing up on the stage with the minister who's going to give the opening prayer. And the minister looks over to him because the minister has a mic. And the minister looks at him. He sees his name is Orlando on his work shirt. And he says, and that's all he's ever been called is Orlando because he really doesn't have a first name.
Right, right.
You know, that's where he was born. He was born in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
So the minister says, you're going to sing the national anthem, right? He goes, yes, I am. He goes, okay, I need to introduce you. He goes, what's your name? He goes, Orlando. He goes, yeah, but what's your first name? And the minister's sort of old, got a hearing problem. And Bo says, it's just Orlando. And the guy thinks he says Justin Orlando. And so he introduces him as Justin Orlando. And Bo loves it. Now he's got a first name. So now his first name is Justin, you know.
That's great.
And so in one of the scenes before he gets stabbed, you see his name is now Justin Orlando. Cool. I don't want to give away the story, but that's not how it ends for Bo bleeding out under the underpass. Good. And the way he comes back, again, there won't be a dry eye on the house. But when we wrote that part, you know, it was just, that's Bo.
Yeah,
you know, people love him.
Yeah. It'd be cool to figure out some kind of little Carrie Underwood little
well,
cameo,
Bo has actually written a song called Invisible that he wants to release prior to the premiere of the movie.
Perfect. Oh,
so
beautiful.
We're excited to have someone like him. Yeah.
That'd be exciting. And when do you expect that one to?
Well, we hope to get a film next year, and this will be released 2021.
Awesome. Very cool. Man, I had a bunch of thoughts through that I just kind of blew through. But there were a couple more things that I wanted to cover. What is an item under $100 that you use on a regular basis that you cannot live without?
Under $100.
Under $100. The cheaper, the better.
I'd say my bottled water that I drink every day because my wife tells me I got to keep hydrating.
You have a particular bottled water that you like?
Whatever the owner of Global has in her fridge. That's my favorite.
You clean her out, huh?
Yeah, that's right. And I have to give a shout out to my partner here at Global. Her name is Vivian Wong.
Yes.
And she is just a sweet lady.
My dad was telling me a little bit about her. Can you tell me about how y'all, I guess, I don't want to say she's been a mentor for you, but certainly a partner. How did that relationship come to be?
I met Vivian originally when I was establishing something called the South Carolina Film Advisory Board. This is when I was trying to get the project moved from North Carolina into South Carolina somewhere. Met Vivian, and the woman's story is just unbelievable. You know, I think she came to Greenville over 50 years ago with her and her husband. Didn't know anybody. I think there was one individual that let them work in his Chinese restaurant.
They came from China directly to Greenville?
Yeah.
No kidding.
I believe so. But she came here a while back, and she was not given anything. I mean, she worked her way to owning shopping centers, hotels, restaurants. And the joke is all political appointments lead through Vivian's office. Very politically astute, very politically engaged, one of the kindest women you'll ever meet. And she's just a sweetheart to me. And she said, when I was looking for, we had narrowed it down either to Columbia, South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, or the Rock Hill area, and where we wanted to really spend some more time and effort on a facility. Mm-hmm. And when we check off our boxes, the next box is, do we have a local partner there that can validate our seriousness and already has the connections. And that's what Vivian has. And she owns Global, Trade Park here, which will hopefully someday turn into Global Studios.
Nice.
And she's just been a huge advocate of what we're doing here. Has opened. That's how I got to make the governor, the lieutenant governor, people like that, and other senators and congressmen. It's all through Vivian.
And I was just reading a somewhat recent article that you guys are actually looking at maybe doing something with Puerto Rico. Is that right? Could you tell me a little bit about that? If you don't mind?
We have a partner who is involved in Puerto Rico, and we said they're trying to obviously rebuild Puerto Rico.
That's what I was wanting to kind of dive into.
Yeah,
with it being, it's kind of I don't want to say a great opportunity because you don't want to think of opportunity with tragedy, but because of the hurricane and all the mess that came through and tore everything up, now I think there might be some opportunity.
Well, when you think of, you got an island down there, so you're very limited in certain industries you can attract.
Right.
You're not
going to be filming a snow movie.
Yeah, are you going to become a technology hub in Puerto Rico? I mean, that's kind of out of the question,
right.
Because you're isolated.
Right.
So what is one of your key industries already down there? Tourism. What's the number one tourism attraction industry in the world? Film and entertainment. So, you can build on that. Now, the problem is, they've gone through bankruptcy. They've gone through, I think, 3 presidents in the last year. So we're still trying to get a comfort level on
for them to get
the
their
financial
feet back underneath
opportunities
bit,
down there.
Georgia.
We're still kicking the tires down there.
That's cool. Tell me, one of the things that tends to make you unique, I feel like, is some of this, the idea of a destination studio, providing like tourism and other ancillary aspects to go with the studio. Mm-hmm. What's your vision with that?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'm not sure how I got that vision or that crazy idea. Most of the studios are what are called industrial complexes. I mean, they're factories,
right?
And they make movies there. Looking at, let's say, the NFL, okay, they usually have, training facilities, and those training facilities were typically in the summer, and they would get some people there. They'd watch them train, and that was about it. And it might be, just a field somewhere. It was nothing really important. I'm just a huge fan of a NFL owner named Jerry Jones, and the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
I mean,
although they're in a bit of a mess right now.
I know, but he I remember a couple of years ago, there was an interview on 60 Minutes, and he was talking about some of the ups and downs in his life. And one time I remember him saying he didn't have hardly any money and went to rent a car somewhere, and they swiped the card and it got declined, and they took out a pair of scissors and cut his card up and said, "Hey, sport,
pay your bills."
Yeah, pay your bills type of thing,
Right.
And at that time, I think I was going through some problems too or something in business or something. And I saw this thing on 60 Minutes, and I just thought that was really cool. So I just wrote Jerry Jones a note, on a I think it was Studio South card or something. I said, you don't know me, but I saw your interview on 60 Minutes. I was really impressed by that. And, that's just great. That's a real inspiration. Bert, send it off. I'm not thinking anything's going to happen, right? A couple weeks later, I get this friggin' box from the Dallas Cowboys with all this paraphernalia and a letter signed by Jerry Jones. I don't know if he signed it or had someone else sign it, but it was a direct letter regarding my note. So it wasn't a form letter, I mean, this guy must get letters and notes.
Yeah, guy's worth a couple
$1,000
$100 million, right?
But for him to take that time to do that, to me, was just really special.
Wow.
So I've already thought that he was a visionary type of person. And that's the other thing, you want to hang around people that are also crazy like you. He went out and raised $1 billion to build that stadium during the middle of the financial crisis.
I mean, I knew it cost $1 billion. I didn't know how that all came to be.
How do you talk about crazy?
Yeah.
$1 billion in the middle of the financial crisis in 2009 when no one knew if, we were going to be selling apples on street corners.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking depression, full-on depression back then.
Right.
I mean, it was serious.
So what he realized, and what I had a friend also a guy named Mark Richardson, who was the son of Jerry Richardson, who owned the Carolina Panthers, and talking with Mark, saying that, like, Jerry, I think, realizes that they're not in the sports business. They're in the entertainment business.
Oh, yeah.
And once you stop entertaining those fans, you got problems, right?
Butts in the seats, right?
That's right. And so, I mean, you look at most NFL games, I think half the people in the stadium have no idea what the score is, who's playing. It's a social event for them,
right.
especially if they're in the sky boxes.
Right.
The sky boxes, they have no idea even where they're at, you know? So
they're just there for the party.
That's right. So what Jerry Jones realized is that, okay, this is a entertainment asset that I have, not necessarily just a sports asset. And so they have built something, going back to this training field thing, they have built an entire complex for training fields. And it's now a destination for, I can't remember how the size of this thing, but it's used. And it has multiple fields now where other people play at, and they have hotels associated with it and restaurants associated with it. So it's a destination now, all reinforcing the Dallas brand.
Right.
So what started out as, oh, you can have this dusty feel over here, and maybe 100 people will show up to watch you, practice. Now you've got 10,000 people showing up to go to the restaurants, going to the theater, going to the hotel room, and then, oh, yes, there's some football going on over there too. So I started thinking, well, we all know the Universal Studio Tours thing.
Right.
But why don't you turn a studio complex into a destination with some shops, some restaurants, and, that type of thing. And that's what's great about having a business partner like Vivian Wong, who knows the restaurant and hospitality.
I was going to say, because that's her line.
Oh,
that's her background.
And that's what she saw.
Yeah.
The soundstage stuff is great, but what I see is
Yeah.
people wanting to book hotel rooms and go to restaurants because they're on a studio lot.
Yeah, and that all that ancillary stuff is really what ultimately becomes your bread and butter at the end of the day.
Right.
The studio stuff just becomes an extra little piece.
Yeah.
of
So
the
our
pie.
plan is to. We have 73 acres here, so there's a lot of land too, just not this building. But also we are very tied into education. This is almost going back to my, college days, being an educator. There are no film schools in the state of South Carolina.
None.
Wow. None. Now, Clemson and USC and Winthrop, they have like video programs.
Right, like video production
I think
or whatever.
Clemson actually has a fairly recognizable animation and like special effects department but for a legitimate film school, there are none. And the reason there are none is I use the analogy, if one of those universities wants to have a medical school, they have to have an association with a teaching hospital.
Right.
Because you have to allow the students to go from the classroom to the real world.
Well, yeah, it's that whole internship and that whole, doing your
So without
doctorate
that teaching hospital, you're not going to have a medical school. Well, there are no studio complexes in South Carolina either. That's why there are no film schools. Because the universities can't offer the student anything else but sitting in a classroom and dissecting Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, right.
Which will really give them a lot of opportunity for employment. So we are talking, and I can't reveal the university yet, but it's the largest university in the state of South Carolina, in helping them develop a film school where accredited, and it'd be undergraduate and graduate, and the graduate students would actually be on this lot in a dormitory facility that they would spend the majority of their time now as interns and working here on the lot.
It becomes cyclical at that point. One hand starts feeding the other, and they really
again, going back to the politicians, we try and get them to remember this phase: export the art, not the artist.
Great advice, man. Yeah,
and that's what happens.
So
There's been some great artists here in South Carolina, but they're gone because there was nothing for them. They couldn't earn a living doing what they
no way
love.
to keep them here. Right.
And to me, an artist is even that gaffer on the set. It's that set designer. It's the costume designer. It's the lighting guy. It's the sound guy.
Yeah,
Those
it's
are
not just
artists.
your regular on-screen talent.
Yeah, I mean, when I think
piece.
of artists in the film industry, I just don't think of on camera, in front of the camera guy. I think of all the people behind that camera. that are artists in their field. And so I'm saying, don't export them to Georgia. Don't export them to New York. Keep them here.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So what do you think it looks like 10 years from now? Both in the state of South Carolina and what you've got going on, but then also as the industry as a whole, because obviously the industry is changing a pretty good bit as well.
Mm-hmm. I think a couple things. One, this is just the tip of the iceberg for content. I think a lot of major organizations are realizing the thing that can separate them from the competition is their images, their branding. I see major corporations getting involved in film as financiers, as backers. It's a way to show what their brand represents. Now, I'm not thinking that Bank of America is going to get involved with Saw 4, but they
it's like
have
a niche market.
They have been involved with documentaries by Ken Burns that had to do with baseball, that had to do with the Civil War, and what that does, it shows their constituents. This is what our value brand, Bank of America, represents.
Like these are the values that we're going to invest in.
Right. So yeah. I can see major corporations who never thought, well, that's the film industry, saying we need to get involved with this film project because this is exactly represents our brand.
And do you think they'll do it from that perspective, or even just from a financial perspective?
I think they're going to do it more from a branding perspective.
From the branding,
right? When you consider how much money some of these major corporations spend on advertising. And not knowing what the benefit of that is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's called QB. It's a new company out by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who is the founder of DreamWorks. He raised $1 billion on a concept that, I love him too, because I'm sure people thought, like, what, are you smoking something, Jeffrey? His concept is, he also has... I can't remember her name. She was, I think, the chairman of the board of Hewlett Packard. As with him with a business partner. His concept is, okay, if I make a movie, I'm saying, Nathan, I'm asking you to spend 2 hours to 2.5 hours to watch this. That's a long time commitment from you in your life, right? Okay, so let's shorten that down. If I asked you to watch my TV show, I'm asking you to spend 60 minutes of your life watching this. That's an hour. That's a long time out of a day. All right. If it's a comedy series, it's a half an hour. He's saying that's still a long time. He's making content for the mobile device only. So you won't be able to watch this content on your computer, on your laptop, or on your TV or anything like that, on your phone only. 10 minutes or less content, episodic series.
Really?
It says everybody has 10 minutes during the day. You're at lunch. You're standing in line at the bank. You're commuting by a train or a car somewhere as a passenger. You have 10 minutes. So he has signed on some of Hollywood's most creative, talented directors, producers, actors,
to make a
10-minute episodic content.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that's brilliant because, one of the things that, everybody's saying is that TVs are now radio and phones are now TV.
Right.
Because, everybody's going to, the phone is not going anywhere. That's only taking over every aspect of our life. So that makes perfect sense. And
then the third thing, you're asking where the industry's going. I'm probably the last person in the United States that ever experienced virtual reality, but I got to do it a couple months ago. My son, who lives in Los Angeles and works in Studio South, he said, have you ever put on the Oculus? I think they're goggles. I said, no. So he put these things on, and it was the Star Wars thing, It just blew my mind.
Unbelievable.
And so what I think is going to happen is people will start using virtual reality more as education and entertainment. Education, the way we're going to be using virtual reality is going back to this movie Child of the Forest with the little girl, Charlene, who survived 3 years. We're making 2 sets of content. We're making the feature film, which is non-interactive, really, with the audience.
Right.
You're just watching it. and we're making a virtual reality version where you are actually her. So now you make the decision to go left, to go right, to go up the tree, to go down the tree, to run, to walk, whatever like that. So it's going to be used not only just for entertainment, but now in a classroom setting, because there's been an entire curriculum that Jack Grossman has developed around this story for junior high and high school. You know,
of like survival skills, or like what is the curriculum based?
Educating junior high and high school students about the Holocaust, which the majority of them now either don't know about or think it was a fantasy.
Right, because so much time has gone by now.
Right, and we're within probably a generation of the Holocaust being forgotten.
Wow. Can you imagine? Could not imagine that.
So now think of the evolution of education during the Holocaust, or about the Holocaust. So 20 years ago, you sat in a classroom and you read a book about the Holocaust, and a teacher talked about the Holocaust. That was it. Okay. Then move that up a little, and now, you see a movie. You see Schindler's List. It becomes more real about the Holocaust, right?
Or even some of that black and white documentary footage.
Right. But now you're sitting in a classroom and you're putting on these octopus goggles and you're experiencing the Holocaust.
That might be a little too intense.
Experiencing it,
That might be too much.
And so, what you're doing now is you're really putting touch points into the educational process for people.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up. One of the interviews from my last season is a buddy of mine who is over in Africa doing the wildlife conservation and whatnot. And they've got these GoPro 360 cams,
Right.
It's basically just a GoPro that sits on a little stand, but it's a 360 degree. It's that whole, and so what they do is they put the virtual goggles on, and you can turn and watch, and they'll put the camera like in a carcass or something, and you'll have all these animals coming up behind you, around you, and you're like right in the carcass kind of thing. Well, but what an interactive experience, though.
Now, there was a movie that Arnold Schwarzenegger did years ago about where it was in the future, and they would just implant the memory.
Total Recall.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Total
Recall. That's a great book, too.
Remember that?
Yeah.
What you do is,
I love it.
So you want to go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Okay. So what they do is they just implant the memory of you going to Hawaii.
You
save you a bunch of money and time and waiting in lines at the airport and everything like that. So what I really think is going to happen is you want to go to the Grand Canyon. You want to visit the Grand Canyon. Okay. What do you have to do now to go visit the Grand Canyon? Either get in a car and drive, because we're 4 days away from the Grand Canyon, and go through that whole hassle of going to the Grand Canyon, or you go to an airport, you get on a plane, you fly there, you rent a hotel room, you go to the Grand Canyon. All right, it's just a hassle, right? What if you could just sit in your chair and put on those goggles and visit the Grand Canyon? Yeah. And I think that's where in the future, a lot of memories, a lot of experiences. Unfortunately, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I think that's where they're going to happen from, is sitting in a chair watching it.
That's a trip. Well, if you think about it, that's kind of like the Instagram of vacation, like because you're it's like the highlights or just the top, just
that's right.
The good parts.
Why go through all that hassle?
Yeah, that's an amazing idea. I definitely think the virtual stuff is coming.
It really is. And talking about virtual reality, the filming process for virtual reality. Now you're talking about. Well, let me talk about first filming for an iPhone or a small screen. That's a whole different type of concept than filming for a 50-foot screen.
Right,
with
totally
a 50-foot screen, you don't do a lot of these things because no one wants their face plastered 50 feet in the air.
Right.
But for a phone, you've got to get close with all these shots because you're talking about a small screen.
Completely
so you don't do a wide
perspective.
shot for a lot of things because you're sitting there going, what's that in the background? Is that a horse? Is that a cow back there or what?
Right.
And then for virtual reality, you don't need a 60-foot ceiling that most sound stages are, because remember, sound stages were really built to build interiors of things and even build sets inside there. So it used to be if you were building a set for a 2-story interior house, you would actually build a 2-story house inside the 60-foot cavernous building. What you do now is you just build the first story and you green screen the second story. and you computerize and animate and put everything else in the second story. So what virtual reality is doing, it's lowering the size of the stages you need, which is great. So you don't need 40,000 square feet of unobstructed space as a soundstage. I mean, you could actually make a movie, a virtual reality film in my office here.
That's incredible.
And so technology is having a huge...
It is.
But, as I said, I tell people, you could hand me the greatest camera in the world and give Steven Spielberg an iPhone, and he will make a better movie than I would make. Because at the end of the day, it's all about creativity and human...
And the story.
And the human creativity behind it. Yeah. And that's what technology can't change.
Yeah, technology will never fix or never be able to supplant that or replace that.
Right.
If you had a podcast, who would you like to sit down and talk to? Or who would you think would be good for this show?
I would, that's a good question. I hadn't even thought about that. I would, if I was in your shoes.
No, from your, but both. I'd love to hear both perspectives, from your and from mine. Who do you think?
They have to be alive?
Yeah, preferably.
Oh, come on, Nathan.
Because the dead guys, I don't stand much of a chance.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
know they stand much of a chance with any of them.
That'd be a one-sided conversation, digging somebody up and sitting them over here.
We're going to figure out how to do that virtual reality education stuff.
Fred, what do you think about this? Speak up, Fred.
Well, it's funny is I often think about. I try to visualize in my mind a board of directors of all deceased people, like my own personal board of directors.
Yeah.
With like Abraham Lincoln and like Jim Rowan and all these different people that are influential in time.
Right.
Like having Churchill to ask about whatever, like what that would be like.
I know. Yeah.
That'd be pretty neat.
It would be great. Okay. They got to be alive, and I don't know. I think, here's a person. I met this person actually. Now they're in Salt Lake City, but this guy was homeless, and the reason we met him because I knew he had been homeless, but he had gotten out of the homeless situation and was raising 2 beautiful children now and had a job and got out of that situation. I remember talking to, and I really get, it's just me, I guess, but I get more interested in just everyday people than I do, quote, either celebrities or people in the news or that type of thing. I think everybody has a story. Everybody does. It's not necessarily a movie needs to be made out of everyone's story, but everybody, I think, has a story. So I get more out of, talking to the barista at Starbucks about her life and just other people, their lives. And so I was talking to this guy. He was a college graduate. He was doing well. He got involved with drugs, and that was his downfall. He had an accident. It was a football injury that got him hooked on the opioids. Yeah. And wound up not being able to keep a job, wound up being homeless in California for a while. And going back to this research we did on homelessness, he got out of that situation only when he said, enough is enough. I can't live like this anymore. Now, fortunately, he had a family unit that was always trying to support him, but your family can't get you out of homelessness. Mm-mm. And so what our movie really delves into...
Or get you off drugs, for that matter.
That's right. They can't. And what addiction. Our movie Invisible really delves with is that, because homelessness is a very complex issue. And I think too many people are looking at it like they're trying to cure a disease. So we're going to dump all this money into this vaccination, or we're going to dump all this money into this pill. And if these homeless people can take this vaccination or pill, they're going to turn them into productive citizens. Homelessness is not an illness like that. And there's so many reasons why people are homeless. Yes, there are mental illness out there, and that's why they're homeless. There's physical illnesses. They physically cannot get a job because they're physically unable to work, Yeah. There's a lot of drug abuse out there. And there are a lot of people who just like that lifestyle. They like it. They like camping out 365 days out of the year, and they don't want the rigors.
They like that autonomy, that freedom that they have.
But there is a group out there that we feel that are represented in this film that until they say enough is enough, it's not going to change. And that's what this guy did. He said, enough is enough. I'm going to get off these drugs. I'm going to get off the streets, and I'm going to be a productive person in society. And until he decided to do that, he said, you could give him a condo on the beach in L.A. and it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
Right. I met him through one of the producers of Invisible.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And so it's people like that I really enjoy just talking to, because in my simplistic way of thinking about homelessness and everything like that, I believe that at one point in that person's life, they had a mother and or a father looking at them with so much promise. And, they wanted nothing but the best for that child. And I'm sure it's breaking a lot of families' hearts to see that child now on the
struggling
streets.
like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, I'd interview a homeless person.
Well, it's funny because the tagline for this show is ordinary people living extraordinary lives. One of the primary goals of the show is to find just day-to-day people that are finding a different path, a better way of living, and not just the 9-to-5. But I want to find successful people, but I'm not looking for celebrity. I'm not looking for, if you're financially successful, but you're going through a divorce and your life's a mess and things, and whatever, then that's not the person that I'm looking for.
Right.
But a lot of those average, everyday people have some really neat
and
stories
a lot of them are anonymous out there. What always gets me is a lot of these wealthy people that donate all this money to charities, which is great, and I think that's honorable. But there's always hooks in it. Like, you got to name that building after me. You got to name this after me. You got to name that after me, because it's their way of being remembered. And it's like, that's fine. As long as the institution, the hospital gets the money, I'm glad your name's on it. But there are a lot of people out there that are doing those types of things and not wanting that kind of recognition. Yeah. And those, to me, are the real heroes, even though, bless the guys that, or the ladies that want their name on the building, that's fine as long as they're, using your money. Yeah.
Well, there's something more fulfilling and purposeful with the act as opposed to just writing a check. For what it's worth, all those organizations, I work with an organization called Hope Through Soap, and they provide showers, a shower service, amongst many other things for the homeless in Atlanta specifically. And they all need money, for sure. Right. But what really makes a difference, and really what changes you, and we both know this from church and from all the service that we do, the acts of service are what are fulfilling, or what are sustaining, and what give you purpose and whatnot. Writing a check is great, and it's awesome, and it's much appreciated by those who need it, but it's not going to change you the way that those service acts do.
Especially if that's the easiest thing that you can do.
Right. Especially, when you've got more money you know what to do with, then what difference does that check make to you? But when it hurts you, or when it takes effort on your part, I think it's much more impactful for you personally. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, for me, I treat service and a lot of this stuff as selfishness for me, because I get so much enjoyment out of it. I don't really go do stuff for the homeless people. I do it because of how I feel once I've done that work, because it makes me feel good about me, kind of thing. Right.
And I was just thinking about this the other day. I was, I don't know if it was Target or somewhere, but the Red Kettle. What is that?
The Salvation Army.
Salvation Army. And what I noticed is that the people putting money in the kettle looked like they could least afford it. There were a lot of people walking by the kettle that looked, now they might not have a lot of money, but they looked like they had some good money. Right. And they would walk by. And then you get the black construction worker who just got off his job, looked like, he's been beat up all day. He's got dust all over him, walking out of Target, and he'll stop and he'll put money in the kettle. It's like, that's sort of interesting the ones that can least afford it sometimes are the ones that actually do.
A lot of times.
You know?
A lot of times. We're going to wrap this up. What's one item on your bucket list? You've already accomplished so much and done so many different things, and it's really neat to me that you've just got to follow your dreams in all these different directions. Is there anything that's on your bucket list that you're towards?
Skydiving
or something?
Yeah,
Crazy like that.
I just I don't ask my wife. I'm kind of boring. People think, what's interesting sometimes, people ask me what I do, and I tell them, well, I'm in the film industry. Oh, that sounds like so exciting, and da-da-da-da-da. And it is. I enjoy it, but to me, what I do is fun and interesting. So as long as I'm blessed with the health to continue to do it, that's my bucket list. I mean, if I do have a bucket list or want some things to accomplish before I'm dead, it's some of these movies because they're really great. But to me, it'd be more to have the educational opportunities with these universities, because you see these kids, and they are kids to me now,
Oh, they're kids to me now,
18,
too.
19-year-olds, and you're giving them an opportunity that they just cherish because they wouldn't have gotten it any other way. How do you get in the film industry unless you know somebody and something's coming in in town for you to work on? I talk quite a bit to the students, and I try not to give the old, live your dreams, don't let people tell you no, because they've heard that so many times.
Right. Well, I'm actually reading a really good book that debunks that whole live your dream thing pretty harshly.
Yeah.
It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Oh,
It's
really?
all about building career capital and getting good at stuff as opposed to following your dreams, because that really just doesn't work.
Yeah. And also, as I talk to some older people or people my age, I also relate that story about, my son Tyson just drawing and me thinking, this kid's going nowhere. Well, first of all, we don't know what the jobs of the future are.
Exactly.
There are people making more money than bankers, lawyers, accountants, doctors, drawing figures, playing video games,
yeah,
doing podcasts, all these other things.
Hopefully someday soon.
Hopefully, and so to pigeonhole people in, well, you've got to make a career. You've got to go to college. You've got to, leave college with at least $150,000 worth in student debt to make it worthwhile.
Gosh,
and then you've got to go work in a cube somewhere until, you are so frustrated with life that you have a midlife crisis. Well, that's just the way the world is. Well, no, it doesn't have to be that way.
Doesn't have to be.
Right.
Yeah. That leads me right into my last question. Being that you're a serial entrepreneur and somebody who's dove into so many different things, and that's really what I hope to do, to dive into a lot of these different projects and ideas that I've been putting together over the last 2 years. What advice would you have for me or somebody like me who's wanting to kind of go down a similar path, to really want to be a serial entrepreneur? I think is what appeals to me the most. What advice would you give me?
Obviously, which is difficult, is you got to have confidence that you can do it first. Most people fail because they just don't have the confidence, or they fail because they don't understand the hard work it's going to take. I mean, I've been laughed out of more meetings probably than anyone. I was involved with something called the U.S. National Whitewater Center in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thank you for bringing that up, because it was on my list and I didn't get to it. Thank you for bringing that point up. Please take a minute to talk about that.
And it wasn't my idea, but there was a guy named Vic Howie who was with Bank of America. This was literally his idea to bring a man-made whitewater center to Charlotte, because he was involved with branding at Bank of America and the Olympics. He was involved with that. And he went over to Germany or somewhere in Europe and saw one of those facilities.
See how they actually work.
Yeah,
because there's like science behind it. There's so much
unbelievable,
to it. Oh,
unbelievable.
Gosh.
So he comes back, and I knew Vic. I can't remember how he met Vic, but he says, hey, I'm building this team. There's going to be 3 of us, you, me, and there was an attorney named Chet Rabin, that we're going to go out and we're going to build this facility. in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're actually going to try and build it downtown. So the concept is you're whitewater rafting between skyscrapers. That's the concept. I go, that's great, Vic. I said, first of all, I know nothing about kayaking, but I got
water
involved,
sports
but
in general.
It sounded so weird. It sounded cool. So
it did sound really cool.
So
yeah,
we literally got laughed out of more meetings because one, the major kickbacks were, this isn't the NFL, this isn't baseball, this isn't football or anything.
Not
like
the
that.
traditional
it's
sport.
Yeah, right. Well, he says, who's going to come from the United States or around to go whitewater rafting? And then we had to educate people. There are like rapids in North Carolina that people go to. Oh yeah,
Currently.
okay, but why are they going to do that? So we literally got laughed out of all these places, and it took us years, like 3 or 4 years, to finally get taken seriously. I guess people thought we just weren't going to go away, and then we got a huge support from a real influential Charlottean that helped us tremendously. And what I love now is that the corporations that slammed the door in our face now are corporate members out there, now have corporate retreats out there. Now the tourism industry that laughed at us stick pictures of the U.S. National Whitewater Center on their cover.
I was going to say,
it's one of the places to visit while in Charlotte,
It's
so
the marquee project.
All these people who were experts, who knew everything, going back to my nothing and nobody knows nothing.
Going right back to where we started.
And I know nothing either. So let's get that on the table right now. So, but you don't know anything, even though you have this title of tourism executive or marketing and branding executive with these major corporations. You know nothing, and this is going to be a huge hit. And it has,
Yeah.
And it goes back to just, again, I still don't know anything about kayaking, and I think that's a misnomer that a lot of entrepreneurs think they have to get so knowledgeable and they have to get all this knowledge before they can even talk to someone. Me personally, I'll talk to anybody about anything, knowing that I don't know anything about it, and even though you're an expert in it, you know nothing about it either. So that puts me at least on a level field where I'm not in awe of somebody.
To have it, because it's not demeaning in any way. It's just not taking anything for granted, not assuming anything coming into it.
And these people that wind up in the corner offices, a lot of them have told me that the way they got there was timing, luck, and knowing the right people.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with their skill set.
We're actually talented.
Yeah, right. So, well, I mean, have you heard the story about, and I know we're way over time, but this is just a great story about, you know who John Hamm, the actor, is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in the Richard Jewell movie about to come out.
Right, okay. Now, this is a story I've heard or read, so I don't know if it's true or not, but it's just a very interesting story. He had been in Hollywood for like 10 years and was going nowhere. And he would go to audition and they say, well, you don't look what we're really looking for. And was sleeping on the couches and everything else, right? And was in a coffee shop one day and overheard two guys talking about auditions that were going to happen for an episodic series. And I don't even know if they mentioned the name or anything, but they talked about where it was at and that type of thing. He overheard them. He writes it down. He goes to the audition, and he lands a part in Mad Men, right? So and now he's a huge movie star. And obviously he's talented and that type of thing. Sure. And he paid his dues to get that part. But what would have happened to him if he wasn't in that coffee shop at that specific time? Or what would have happened if he was in that coffee shop at the same time, but was across the room where he didn't hear these two guys talking?
Or even heard the guys talking, heard what they were saying, and chose not to do it.
That's right.
That's
exactly.
The ones that keep me up at night. Is like these little, because I'll have little experiences like that, and I've tried to force myself to act on them immediately. Because if you don't, you wonder, like, is that the one?
Right. Well, as I used to tell my kids, you're not going to get discovered sitting on your couch. It's just not going to happen. I know I get made fun of by some people, because I'll talk to anybody about their film, their script, their project, whatever. And people say, why are you wasting your time with that person? Or, they're nobody. They've never done anything. And I go, that doesn't, yeah, right. So why not? They only have so many hours during the day. They only have so many years on this planet. If you cannot make someone's life a little easier and make them feel a little better about themselves, and even though I'm nothing in the film industry, some people feel that, hey, I got to talk to a guy today who's made movies and is going to be running a studio and has these business partners and all this other stuff. What's wrong with that? And the other thing is, the biggest bug I have is people telling me how busy they are. Oh, I'm a very busy person. Oh, I don't know if I have time for this. I'm a very busy person. Dude, I got 8 movies in development. We're developing a major complex here in Greenville. We're helping a major university develop a film school. I mean, come on.
And yet you replied to my email within no time flat. And you didn't. I mean, you knew I was the son of Richard River, but I'm a nobody, and yet you were. Well, tell your
father I'm still waiting on the check.
That's brilliant. Oh yeah.
Obviously, it hasn't arrived yet.
Well, so just to wrap it up, he did want me to pass along to you. We talked about health and wellness and all that, and he wanted to know how your exercise was going, because he said back in Charlotte, we had the worms. Thing going on and whatnot, and somehow you got the reputation of the guy upstairs hanging out, just taking it easy, not breaking the sweat from time to time.
Well, you're not taking it seriously when you don't have to wash your workout clothes for a month or two.
Right.
Well,
to be honest with you, I think you were the only sane one amongst that bunch of folks.
Those guys were crazy. Those guys are crazy. Yeah, but your father is a good friend, and
well, there's so many great memories of Charlotte, and certainly the impact that you've had on that city and the Carolinas, and what you're doing with trying to bring this industry. I mean, you've got this bigger vision, you've got this big plan, and it's so appealing to me to be able to reach out to someone like you, because I hope to have access to more influential people and more opportunities like that. But you're one of the first guys I've really been able to sit down with a serial entrepreneur like that's really just done so many different things. That's why I was so excited to just pick your brain, because it's like that's the goal. That's what I strive to do, and you're a big example to me, and I really appreciate it. You taking the time to spend with us.
This has been fun. Enjoyed it. I remember you sent me a list of some of the questions. One of the things that I thought about was, how would you like to be remembered?
Yes, I was going to ask that, but I didn't.
That's fine. Yes. And I was thinking about that, and I know this sounds stupid, which is fine with me. I really don't care if I'm remembered. I think the people that I touch and am related to, they will remember me, I hope. But I don't go through life, am I going to be remembered positively, negatively, as an idiot, as a dreamer, as tilting at windmills type of guy? It really doesn't matter to me. The people that matter to me most, like my family and some friends and people like that, I hope that they will remember me fondly. But if no one, I heard this great statistic: 1 million people every day in the world do not wake up; they die. 1 million people a day. Now that's accidents, that's, a lot of things, but 1 million people a day. When I pass away, I think there's 3 billion people in China, something like that. It will not have any effect on 3 billion people. Oh, right. It won't have any effect on people in South America. It won't affect anybody in Canada. It won't affect anybody in Europe. It will only have a very small effect on a handful of people that I did not wake up that day. Yeah. And to me, one, I believe I'll see them again, so that's not a big deal. But as for being remembered by what I've done or anything like that, I really don't even think about it. Yeah. And it doesn't,
it's not important.
It's not important.
It's not a priority.
It's not important. I know that
you don't need your name on the side of that building like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I just don't need that. To me, it's not important to me, and I think the people who the people I hope that will remember me, I hope will.
Yeah. Well, and I look at it from the perspective of and when I was formulating that question to ask, I think of it along the vein of how many people can I have a positive impact on?
I mean, it's an excellent question. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, how do I want to be remembered? And I was thinking about, I really don't care if I'm remembered. I think the people that I want to remember me will remember me. Everyone else, screw them.
Yeah, the heck with them, right? Well, it goes back to you're not going to please all the people all the time.
Yeah,
like that,
right.
Do you, right?
Right,
like that's
I know.
what it's all about at
That's
the end
right.
of the day. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and doing you is so neat to watch. And obviously you've been a big example for your kids as well to watch what they're doing too. It's been really neat.
Yeah, unfortunately, my two sons have the entrepreneurial bug, and I tell them every day, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're my children for having lived like this, but yet my son Evan has the bug, and he's doing his own thing and working with me, and obviously Tyson is doing his thing, and Morgan, our daughter, is she's the perfect mother with our two grandsons.
That's awesome.
So
well, I tell you, having that entrepreneurial bug, I think, is really, really good. I spent the first half of my career never even considering anything entrepreneurial whatsoever. I was so conservative. I was so afraid to put myself out there. I mean, my thought was, just like what we were talking about earlier, getting that corporate job, getting in a cubicle, just getting a solid, consistent income, saving a good chunk of change, retiring at 65, kind of following that same generic model that, quite frankly, really doesn't exist.
Right.
But since I have taken the leap of jumping into my own business, even back with construction way back then, before I got into all of this, you get so much more out of life, and you're learning so much more. And that I would rather live that entrepreneurial life and fail time after time after time after time, and quite frankly, never succeed, never see major financial success. I would rather do that than live my life financially successful in that cubicle, going through those motions, sleepwalking through life.
Well, I heard a great story. It's a football analogy. It was like there's three types of people in the world. So think of a football stadium and a football game's going on. There's three types of people in the world. They're the people in the stands that are the fans, and they're watching the game, and they're cheering the game on, and when their team is winning, they're happy, and when their team is losing, they're kind of sad. But they're just watching. And basically, they're watching life go by.
Yeah, bystanders.
Yeah, the second group is the players on the bench. Now, they're closer to the field, and they're closer to the action, but they're still on the bench. So when their team is winning, they're happy, and they're even happier than the fans because they're part of the team. And when their team is losing, they're sadder, and they're sadder than the fans because they're part of the team. But then there's a third group of people, and that's the actual players on the field, and they're the ones playing the game, and they're the ones getting beat up. And when they lose, they feel the worst out of everybody in that stadium. But when they win, they're the happiest of anybody in that stadium because they know they did it. Now, it just depends on what do you want to be. Do you want to be a fan? Do you want to sit on the bench? Or do you want to play the game? I've decided I'd rather play the game. I've lost a lot of games, and I've had a lot of people boo me as I walked off that field. But there's no feeling like winning and walking off that field.
Yeah, you're getting the full experience on both sides.
Right.
Way so much more than standing on the sidelines. Yeah, and I think that's the key. I mean, it's getting into the game and taking that action and moving forward. Bert, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this, and I'm looking forward to a lot of exciting things to come. Plug anything that you want to plug.
Yeah, they can follow social media. StudioSouth.us is our website.
Okay.
And that's where most of the information about our films and our other projects are. And then obviously,
if you need to get a film done,
that's
you don't got room in Atlanta, come on up.
That's right.
Come on
so
up, 85.
we always, we use social. I use social media mainly for business. I really don't care what people have for lunch or dinner and pictures of it. So
it's a weird world, man.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah.
But follow us, and again, I enjoyed this opportunity to talk. Hopefully, this might be a benefit to somebody out there?
Yeah, I know. If nothing else, it was a benefit to me. And I always tell you guys, don't worry about it because nobody's listening anyway. So it always works out. But
all right.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening. So what'd you think? What did I miss? Anything that you wanted to hear that I didn't cover? What do you want to know more about? Who would you like to see on the show? Hit us up on social media and tell me what you think. Check us out on iTunes and please leave a review. We're now on Patreon and your support there helps let us know we're headed in the right direction. We have a lot of exciting new things coming, fascinating guests, and some of the craziest stories you won't believe. So stay in the loop and check out more great content by subscribing at our website, 8keystoGreat.com. Special thanks to my guests and all those of you living an extraordinary life. This is Nate G. We'll see you next week.